Zohran Kwame Mamdani, The Making of a Movement Politician. Introduction: A new type of representative. In the annals of New York politics, the year 2020 was a watershed moment. Amid a global pandemic and a national reckoning on racial justice, a wave of grassroots, socialist-backed candidates swept into office, challenging the long-entrenched democratic establishment. Among the most striking victories was that of Zohran Kwame Mamdani, a 28-year-old housing counselor and Democratic Socialists of America (DSA) organizer, who unseated a 9-year incumbent in the New York State Assembly's 36th district. Mamdani's ascent was not an isolated event, but the culmination of a unique personal and political journey. A journey that wove together a legacy of intellectual dissent, the gritty reality of New York's housing crisis, and a strategic, unapologetic vision for socialist politics. His story is not merely one of personal ambition fulfilled, but a case study in the modern American left's evolving strategy: to build power from the ground up and then wield it within the halls of government. This article delves deep into the formative influences of Mamdani's early life, his radicalization as an organizer, and the significant legislative and political achievements that have marked his tenure, positioning him as a defining figure in the new landscape of American progressivism. Early life and formative influences, 1992 to 2014. An international and intellectual inheritance, Zohran Kwame Mamdani was born in 1992 in Kampala, Uganda, into a family where the analysis of power and the art of storytelling were the family business. His identity was shaped from the beginning by a confluence of worlds. His name itself is a map of his heritage. Zohran is of Hebrew origin, while his middle name, Kwame, a Ghanaian name given to boys born on a Saturday, is a direct nod to Kwame Nkrumah, the pioneering Pan-Africanist and first president of Ghana. This was not a casual choice. It was a declaration of a political and cultural consciousness that would deeply inform his worldview. His father, Mahmoud Mamdani, is one of the most prominent and influential political theorists and anthropologists of his generation. A scholar of colonialism, post-colonialism, and the politics of identity, the elder Mamdani's works, such as Citizen and Subject and Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, are critical interrogations of power structures and the legacy of imperialism. From his father, Zohran inherited a framework for understanding the world that was inherently skeptical of dominant narratives and attuned to the ways in which systems, rather than just individuals, perpetuate inequality. His mother, Mira Nair, is an acclaimed filmmaker known for her vibrant, humanistic portrayals of life in the Indian subcontinent and its diaspora. From Salaam Bombay, which offered a stark, empathetic look at the children of Mumbai's slums, to Monsoon Wedding, a celebration of modern Indian family life. Nair's work is defined by its ability to find the universal in the specific, to give voice to the marginalized, and to challenge stereotypes through compelling narrative. From her, Zohran learned the power of story, of culture, and of representation as a tool for social change. This unique household, a blend of rigorous academic critique and creative, narrative-driven art, provided a constant dialogue between theory and practice, between analyzing the world and reimagining it. Dinner table conversations were likely less about daily trivialities and more about the politics of representation, the mechanics of state power, and the responsibilities of the artist and intellectual. Transitions. From Kampala to New York City. When Zohran was a child, the family moved to New York City, settling in Morningside Heights, Manhattan. This move placed him at another crossroads: the rarefied air of Columbia University, where his father taught, and the dynamic, diverse, and often struggling urban community that surrounded it. This environment sharpened his understanding of inequality, as he witnessed the stark contrast between the privilege of the Ivy League institution and the realities of the city just beyond its gates. His secondary education was at Stuyvesant High School, one of New York City's most prestigious and competitive specialized public schools. Gaining admission to Stuyvesant is based solely on a high-stakes standardized test, and the school has long been a gateway for the children of immigrants, particularly from Asian American communities. For Mamdani, this experience was formative in complex ways. It was an environment of intense academic pressure and intellectual ferment, but it was also a microcosm of a certain kind of meritocratic ideal that he would later come to question. The competitive, individualistic striving of Stuyvesant stood in tension with the collectivist, systemic critiques he was absorbing at home. This duality, navigating elite institutions while being steeped in a philosophy that critiqued their very foundations, became a central theme of his personal development. Wesleyan and political disillusionment. For his undergraduate studies, Mamdani chose Wesleyan University, a liberal arts college in Connecticut known for its progressive, activist student body and its strong programs in political theory and the humanities. Wesleyan provided a more fertile ground for his burgeoning political interests than Stuyvesant had. He could delve into political philosophy, engaging directly with the texts and ideas that had shaped his father's work and the broader tradition of leftist thought. It was during his time at Wesleyan that he took a step that would prove pivotal in his political evolution. He secured an internship with the Democratic National Committee, DNC, in Washington, D.C. For many young, politically minded students, such an internship is a coveted foot in the door of mainstream politics, a chance to see the machinery of power up close. For Mamdani, the experience had the opposite of its intended effect. Inside the DNC, he witnessed what he later described as a party apparatus deeply enmeshed with corporate interests, more committed to fundraising and electoral strategy than to transformative policy. He saw the culture of compromise and incrementalism not as a pragmatic necessity, but as a fundamental barrier to addressing the crises of inequality, healthcare, and climate change. This first-hand disillusionment with the democratic establishment was a critical rupture. It pushed him decisively away from a path of working within the traditional system, and toward a belief that meaningful change would require building power outside of it. This was the end of his education in establishment politics, and the beginning of his self-education in radical organizing. The Organizing Years, Theory Meets Practice, 2014 to 2020, The Housing Counselor, The Front Lines of the Crisis. After graduating from Wesleyan in 2014, Mamdani returned to New York City, eventually settling in the diverse and rapidly gentrifying neighborhood of Astoria, Queens. Unlike many of his peers from elite institutions who might have pursued careers in law, finance, or tech, he took a job as a housing counselor at the Chaya Community Development Corporation. Chaya is a nonprofit organization dedicated to serving New York's South Asian and Indo-Caribbean communities, with a focus on housing justice, foreclosure prevention, and tenant rights. This role was far more than a job. It was a political and personal immersion into the most pressing crisis facing everyday New Yorkers. Day after day, Mamdani sat across from tenants, often immigrants, often people of color, often non-English speakers, who were facing the brutal end of the housing market. He documented cases of illegal evictions, deplorable living conditions, lack of heat and hot water, and the predatory tactics of landlords seeking to push out rent-stabilized tenants to make way for higher-paying residents. This work stripped away any abstract, theoretical understanding of capitalism he might have held. He was now confronting its human cost directly. He saw how housing insecurity was not an accident, but a feature of a system designed to prioritize profit over human dignity. He learned the intricate, often Byzantine details of New York's housing law, understanding its weaknesses and the loopholes landlords exploited. This practical knowledge would later become a critical asset in his legislative work. More importantly, it gave him a profound sense of solidarity with the city's working class and a burning conviction that the status quo was untenable. The Democratic Socialists of America and base building. While his work at Chaya provided the what, his concurrent involvement with the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, provided the how. The DSA, a once dormant organization, was experiencing a dramatic renaissance following Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. Thousands of young people, disillusioned by centrist politics and energized by Sanders' message of democratic socialism, flooded into its ranks. Mamdani became a key organizer within the New York City chapter, specifically focusing on its housing working group. This was where his theoretical framework, his practical experience from Chaya, and his strategic mind converged. The DSA's model, which Mamdani embraced fully, was base building or socialist organizing. This model moves beyond simply protesting or lobbying for policies. It involves the patient, difficult work of organizing people at the point of their exploitation, in their workplaces and their homes. He helped lead and organize tenant unions across the city, particularly in Queens. This involved knocking on doors, holding meetings in living rooms and community centers, and empowering renters to see themselves not as isolated victims, but as a collective force. He trained tenants in their legal rights, supported them in forming organizing committees, and helped them launch collective actions, rent strikes, press conferences, picket lines, to demand repairs and fight off evictions. This work was foundational to his political philosophy. It was a politics of solidarity, not saviorism. The goal was not for an outside organizer to fix the problem, but to build the collective power of tenants so they could fight for themselves. This model stood in stark contrast to the transactional service provider model of many traditional nonprofits and the top-down, messaging-focused approach of mainstream political campaigns. For Mamdani, the tenant union was the essential cell of a future socialist society, a practical example of democracy in action, and a direct challenge to the power of landlords. The 2020 primary. A movement runs for office. By 2019, the socialist movement in New York, turbocharged by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's stunning primary victory in 2018, was looking to expand its beachhead in electoral politics. The DSA embarked on a strategy of targeting incumbent Democrats in state and local races, understanding that true power in New York rests not just in Congress, but in the often opaque machinery of the state government in Albany. Mamdani decided to run for the New York State Assembly's 36th district, which encompassed his home neighborhood of Astoria and parts of Long Island City. The incumbent was Aravella Simotas, a mainstream Democrat who had held the seat since 2010. On paper, she was a formidable opponent with the backing of the county Democratic machine, significant fundraising networks, and the name recognition of a sitting official. Mamdani's campaign, however, was a textbook execution of the DSA's movement electoral strategy. It was powered not by corporate PAC money or political connections, but by the same base-building principles he had practiced as an organizer. A bold, unapologetic platform. His platform was a clear socialist agenda. Its pillars included universal rent control, advocacy for good cause eviction legislation to protect all tenants from unjust evictions and predatory rent hikes. The New York Health Act, a state-level single-payer healthcare system to guarantee healthcare for all as a human right. Defunding the police, a call to cut the NYPD budget by over $1 billion and reinvest those funds in community services, public housing, education, and mental health care. A Green New Deal for New York, a massive, publicly funded investment in renewable energy and green jobs. Taxes on the rich, support for progressive tax legislation to make the ultra-wealthy pay their fair share. A people-powered campaign. The campaign was fueled by a massive volunteer corps, largely drawn from the DSA and local tenant unions. They knocked on over 100,000 doors, engaging voters not in vague platitudes but in concrete conversations about the issues that affected their daily lives. They built a genuine connection to the community that Simotas's campaign, reliant on more traditional mailers and endorsements, could not match. Grounding in local struggle. Mamdani was not an outsider parachuting in with an ideology. He was a housing counselor who had fought alongside his neighbors. This authenticity was palpable. When he spoke about the housing crisis, he could reference specific buildings and landlords in Astoria. He was a part of the community he sought to represent. The June 2020 primary occurred in a city reeling from the first wave of COVID-19 and erupting in protests after the murder of George Floyd. Mamdani's messages of structural change, defunding the police, and holding landlords accountable resonated powerfully in this moment of crisis. He defeated Simotas by a margin of 1,826 votes, a stunning upset that sent shockwaves through New York's political establishment and confirmed the DSA as a lasting force in the city's politics. Achievements in office, radical pragmatism in action, 2021 to present. Since taking office in January 2021, Assemblyman Mamdani has faced the critical test. Can a movement politician effectively govern? His tenure has been defined by a strategy he and his allies term radical pragmatism, using the tools of the state to advance a transformative agenda while simultaneously building external pressure to make that agenda possible. His achievements can be categorized into legislative victories, budgetary fights, and a redefinition of the role of an assembly member. Legislative champion. The fight for good cause eviction. Mamdani's most significant and defining legislative achievement has been his relentless championing of the Good Cause Eviction Bill, which he sponsors in the Assembly. This legislation aims to provide a universal baseline of protection for tenants across New York State, closing loopholes that have left millions vulnerable. The bill would prevent landlords from evicting tenants without a stated good cause, such as non-payment of rent or violating the lease. Cap annual rent increases at either 3% or 1.5 times the rate of inflation, whichever is higher, protecting tenants from the predatory rent hikes that are used to force them out. Grant tenants the right to challenge rent increases that are deemed unconscionable. For Mamdani, this bill is the direct legislative translation of his work as a housing counselor and organizer. It is a systemic solution to the very problems he witnessed daily at Chaya. He has masterfully used his position to elevate the bill from a fringe idea to a central plank of New York's housing debate. He has held hearings, organized with statewide tenant coalitions like Housing Justice for All, and used media appearances to relentlessly make the case for the policy. While the bill has yet to be signed into law statewide, facing fierce opposition from the real estate lobby and more conservative Democrats, its momentum is a testament to Mamdani's advocacy. Crucially, he has helped pass localized versions of good cause in several New York cities, including Albany, Kingston, and Newburgh, demonstrating its viability and building a statewide precedent. This inside-outside strategy, pushing locally while fighting statewide, is a hallmark of his pragmatic approach to building power. Expanding the horizon: healthcare, climate, and decarceration. Beyond housing, Mamdani has been a vocal and strategic advocate for a suite of other progressive priorities, demonstrating a comprehensive political vision. Healthcare for all. He is a co-sponsor and ardent supporter of the New York Health Act, the state-level single-payer bill. Recognizing the uphill battle for its full passage, he has also fought for and helped secure funding for Coverage for All, a bill that would extend state-funded health insurance to all low-income New Yorkers regardless of immigration status. This is a key incremental victory toward the ultimate goal of universal health care, directly impacting hundreds of thousands of people. A public, green future. In a major victory for the climate movement, Mamdani played a key role in securing state funding in the 2024 budget to establish a public power authority. This is a foundational step toward creating a utility that is publicly owned, democratically controlled, and powered by renewable energy. It is a direct challenge to the for-profit monopoly of Con Edison and a tangible move toward a Green New Deal for New York, aiming to lower costs for consumers while accelerating the transition off fossil fuels. Treat, not trick, and decriminalization. Reflecting a commitment to a public health approach to social issues, Mamdani is a leading proponent of the Treat, Not Trick bill. This legislation would decriminalize the possession of controlled substances and invest heavily in harm reduction, overdose prevention centers, and voluntary treatment. It represents a radical shift from the failed war on drugs toward a compassionate, evidence-based policy that saves lives. The How Many Stops Act. In late 2023, Mamdani was a forceful advocate for this crucial police transparency bill, which requires NYPD officers to report on all investigative encounters, including the low-level stops that often target people of color. When Mayor Eric Adams vetoed the bill, Mamdani was at the forefront of the successful effort to override the veto, a significant check on mayoral power and a win for police accountability. The politician organizer. Redefining the role. Perhaps Mamdani's most profound achievement is his redefinition of what it means to be an elected official. He operates not as a distant politician who shows up at election time, but as an embedded organizer-politician. Accountability to the movement. He maintains deep ties with the DSA and tenant unions, seeing them not as special interests, but as his base of accountability. He regularly participates in actions, rallies, and strikes, blurring the line between protester and politician. He uses his platform to amplify the demands of organizers rather than to dictate them. Participatory budgeting. He has embraced and expanded participatory budgeting processes, allowing his constituents to directly decide how to spend millions of dollars in state funds on local projects. This is a practical application of democratic socialism, devolving power directly to the community. Strategic use of office. He understands that his power is not solely in his vote, but in his ability to act as a megaphone and a disruptor. He uses committee hearings to question officials aggressively, files lawsuits to challenge unconstitutional policies, such as one challenging the state's controversial bail reform laws from the left, and consistently frames his arguments not in terms of partisan politics, but in terms of class struggle. The Blueprint and the Future. Zohran Kwame Mamdani's journey from the intellectually charged home of his childhood to the tenant apartments of Astoria and finally to the floor of the New York State Assembly represents a new blueprint for political change. His early life gave him the analytical tools to deconstruct systems of power. His work as a housing counselor provided him with an unshakable empathy and a concrete understanding of the state's failures. His organizing with the DSA taught him the methodology of building collective power. His achievements in office demonstrate that this path is not just about protest, it is about governance. By championing good cause eviction, expanding healthcare access, laying the groundwork for public power, and fighting for decarceration, he is proving that a movement-backed politician can translate grassroots energy into tangible policy gains. He operates on the fundamental principle that politics is not a profession, but an extension of organized struggle. The ultimate test for Mamdani and the movement he represents lies ahead. Can they pass their flagship policies like the New York Health Act and statewide good cause eviction? Can they withstand the counteroffensives from well-funded corporate interests and a powerful political establishment? Whatever the answers, Zohran Mamdani has already irrevocably shifted the political terrain in New York. He has shown that another world is not just possible, but that it is being built block by block, tenant union by tenant union, and bill by bill, by a new generation of leaders who are accountable not to the donors in the balcony, but to the people in the streets. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.